bad ideology that could actually stain humanity for years and years ahead. It is a barbaric custom of the past, and we will show you why, on side proposition, we believe that the consumption of animals is bad. Okay, before I start off, I would like to give some definitions. First of all, meat is defined by the flesh of animals, and then ban is defined by making something illegal to buy. Okay, now, moving on to the model. So we would make, on our side, the consumption of meat illegal. And for that, we would educate people about why we should ban meat and convince them, of course. And we would also give them fines for those who do not follow these rules specifically, which primarily would be the wealthy class of society, since the lower class of society would potentially not consume meat as much as the higher class. Okay, so for our burdens today, our side proposition would ban meat and show that meat consumption does more harm than good and in a net negative. And the side opposition would show the opposite, which would result in a net positive. Okay. Now, starting off with the arguments. So, on our side, the first argument would be that the consumption of animals is bad for the environment. How so? So, when animals belch, they emit toxic gases, primarily methane. And methane is a gas that is known to be toxic, around 10 times worse than or more than 10 times worse than CO2 gases. And this would immensely hurt the environment and would have an effect on global warming and greenhouse emissions. And this would only worsen the case of our environment. And then these animals that we're talking about would primarily be cows, pigs, and sheep. Okay, moving on. The product of meat causes the destruction of biodiversity. How so? Let's give an example of sheep in North Africa or pigs, for example, in Florida. They would go take these animals and they would eat baby plants. And this obviously is hurting the environment because they're these animals are consuming baby plants and ruining the next generation of plants for our own selfish reasons and for us to be able to eat those animals. And yeah, we would just ruin the ecosystem just to raise a specific animal. Okay, our next argument would be that it is morally wrong. We can all agree that animals are conscious beings, and obviously not as conscious as humans, but they are conscious. And so that means they have feelings, so they can feel pain, they have fear, and so killing them should not be, well, it is not morally correct, as we would be torturing them and as we would be hurting them while killing them for our own selfish reasons, which are to eat them. And just because they are not as intelligent or as conscious as we are, doesn't mean we should take advantage of them and slaughter them just for, again, our own selfish reasons. And on that note, we could say that vegetables also are livings, but they are not as conscious as well, they're not conscious at all. And so they cannot feel. And that is why it would make it morally correct that we can eat vegetables rather than animals, because, well, vegetables do not feel and do not get scared. Okay, so that is all for the arguments. But before I wrap up, I believe that there are some preemptions that the other side could talk about, which is that they might say that meat is nutrition or nutritional and rich, but no, because the main thing about meat is, basically when we talk about meat, we instantly think of iron and we instantly think of protein. But the thing is, iron is found in vegetables. We could say that it is found in beetroots, in lentils, etc. And protein is found in also vegetables like mushrooms, like nuts, like beans, etc. And in fact, 50% of the required protein that a human needs is from plants. And the proof that humans can in fact live and survive without meat is an example of the Jains in India, and they have many more communities in the world that survive for years and years and even millennia without consuming any type of meat. And this simply shows how it is easy for us to not consume meat. We just choose to do it. Go ahead.
Well, we are evolved as omnivores, so we do eat meat. We were not evolved as herbivores. We need them. We need meat to a certain extent.
That's what I was saying. Why do we need meat? We chose to eat meat. We are not obliged to eat meat because, again, the things we find in meat are found in vegetables as well. So we chose to eat meat. We do not need meat, just like animals do. And yeah, that is why we believe that meat must be banned, and that is all. I'm so proud to propose meat.
Thank you for the fine speech that lasted 6 minutes and 40 seconds. And we can now leave the floor, if both judges are ready, okay, to the first speaker of opposition team for their speech. Yeah.
And distinguished panel. We will be opposing this motion in four main points, which will be as one, ethical perspective, two, linked with one, we have other alternative actions to take upon this point. Those will be mentioned by me. And three, economical impact on agricultural countries, which have economies based on those farming actions. And four, we already have a progress in the means of animal rights and industry, and the third and fourth point will be mentioned by my second speaker. So, our stance in this motion is that the problem is not raised by us eating meat, but it is that farming has been industrialized for both animal rights and for environmental impacts. So, as a little rebuttal, as the proposition team proposes, the animals are tortured, the animals are having bad lives. It's not the result of us eating meat, but it's the result of industrialized farming. But there are also a world that we can just prevent industrialization, but still continue our farming actions, as Burhan will be mentioning in his, just a second, in his speech during the economies. Yes, please.
Okay. You mentioned the industrialization of animal agriculture. However, the argument from morality still stands, even if it's a single individual, because these are animals that have feelings, that have the ability to feel pain and fear. How do you respond to this?
Okay, thank you for the question. I will be answering this perspective in my arguments, and I'm coming to that point exactly. The ethical perspective. First of all, we are also a part of the food chain, as we can see. We are also evolved as carnivores. We are also evolved as eating meat and requiring the proteins, the essential proteins included in the meat. Also, as we are also a part of nature, we believe that if we didn't eat and if we didn't become such conscious organisms, we will also be involved in the food chain and the animals would eat us, or we will still be continuing eating the animals. So we cannot just, we believe we cannot just oversee the biological aspect of us and biological embodiment of people. Just we are
Yeah, why?
conscious. We still, I'm not taking any right now, thank you. We still have needs of proteins, and we still have needs of carnivorous feeding styles. So, since we as evolved in this order, the biological order, we still have a right, we believe, to have an access to those needs inherently. And coming to the second point, we have other alternative actions, clashing with the proposition team's environment arguments. Yes, there is an impact on environment. Yes, there is methane release of methane costs of farming, but just to consider, methane has enough little place in the atmosphere to compensate its effect on the global warming. But what causes global warming more is the carbon dioxide, and what just contributes to the carbon dioxide releases? The companies, the factories, the capitals, and we, as the motion proposes, banning on eating meat causes a it focuses on the actions of general public. It focuses on the actions of the base, the people, not the capitals, not the richest, or not the overly consumption factories. So we believe if we want to put a resolution on the environmental factors, the first action we should take is not to change the people's lives, but also to change the capital's interest, because we can see that, not right now, thank you, we can see that meat is an important factor in 3 different ways on people's lives. First, it's a pleasure for many people, like eating meat is a luxury and a welfare lifestyle for many people around the world. So it's a pleasure for people. Also, it plays an important role in many cultures and also many religious attitudes. So it is embodied inside the people's lives. And lastly, it has also an undisputable health impact as well on people's lives. As I mentioned, we are evolved in this way, and we require the proteins comes with animals. So the point is not that we cannot be healthy without eating meat, but eating meat, and meat is an embodied and important part in people's lives. And such a ban would change would switch a big differentiation in public lives. And public is not the main responsible for the ongoing crisis, ongoing global warming crisis in the world. I can't take the floor right now.
There's opposition, I believe, that people can change their ways and develop as a species.
Thank you, but this wouldn't be probably in a short term. If we then switch, we then evolve, then this should be also in a natural way as we come today. So not an artificial way. We saw the artificial actions, just very, very artificial actions took us today, the crisis, all the environmental crisis. So if we will evolve again, then this should be in a natural path, we believe. So they say it's not essential, and as an opposing view to our arguments, it's not essential for health, etc. But we believe that switch is not easy, and it costs a lot, and it gives a big responsibility to people's lives, and we believe that people are not directly responsible for this. And also, putting onto scale, the other arguments of them, putting onto scale. Yes, another factor is that another negative impact that animals have on the environment is that consuming some plants or something, but put it into the scale. We have a switch, a big switch in people's life that meat has an important factor of people's life, and they have to switch that. And a small amount of planet. What is the significance of that? Argument? I can understand. So we believe in this match we should be answering to they should be answering two problems. One, why is banning legit exactly? Why those people, the public, should pay the costs of those environmental crises, and how this switch will be ethical, how this big switch in people's lives will be ethical, because those habits that people have will be switched so easily. And we believe also the environmental impact that is not that huge. So as I mentioned, my friend also be linking the parts with ethical parts with economical aspects, and already the progress we took all today.
Thank you for the fine speech that lasted 8 minutes and 3 seconds. And we can now leave the floor to the second speaker of proposition team.
I will be starting by doing this speech by doing three things. First, I will be rebutting what opposition has said. Second, I will be rebuilding the proposition's case. And thirdly, I will be presenting the proposition's final argument. Now, let's start with the things opposition has said. First of all, there are two major arguments that they have presented so far. First, on they titled their arguments on the ethical impact. In reality, this was more on the human evolutionary impacts of this. The truth of the matter is that it is true. In the distant past, humans evolved as omnivores. There is a time in our distant past where humans had to eat meat to survive. But we do not live in the distant past. We live in the current day, where where the nutritions that we used to rely on meat for, we can get from other things. You mentioned proteins. We're so glad you did. That was actually mentioned in our rebuttal. We mentioned that, in our preemption, we mentioned that beans, nuts, mushrooms, lentils, these are massive, major sources of protein. In fact, the average meat eater, as already mentioned, the average meat eater already gets 50% or more of their protein requirement from plants and mushrooms. So if that is the case, how then can you argue that meat is necessary when just eating more of these high protein plant-based foods would net the exact same benefits? As for, go ahead.
Well, it's not just the quantity of the protein, it's the specialty of the proteins that the meats have. They're essential proteins for the human brain to develop in some cases.
I will respond to this. The biology of proteins is in fact very simple, and proteins are made up of a couple of building blocks and can therefore be converted into other types of protein. It is fairly easy. In fact, this is what cows do when they eat beans. One of the major sources of cow food is soybeans. What are they doing? They are taking the protein in the soy and turning it into protein in their own bodies. Humans are equally capable of doing that within their own bodies. That is why so much of the protein already comes from nuts and beans and lentils and mushrooms. Now, I will move on to their second argument about alternative actions. Within this argument, they mentioned that methane is a small part of the environmental impact of climate change. This is absolutely incorrect from a purely factual basis. The fact of the matter is that methane is, as mentioned in our proposition speech, methane is 10 times, more than 10 times, more efficient at trapping heat than carbon dioxide. They mentioned that there's a lot more carbon dioxide than methane in the atmosphere. But here's what must be known. The atmosphere is 99% two gases, oxygen and nitrogen. The majority of the gases, of the gas in the atmosphere is just these two gases. All of climate change happens in that remaining 1%. So just going from the argument that, oh, it's not a very significant part of the atmosphere is missing the point. Because just a tiny change in the atmosphere, a tiny change in the composition of the atmosphere in both methane or carbon dioxide, but in this case we're focusing on methane, is destructive. Now, before I move on, I will discuss some of the other statements that opposition has made that were not part of any one specific argument. They mentioned eating meat is a pleasure. That is certainly true. There are a lot of cultures that give an emphasis on meat, that give a reverence to meat, or that eat meat as a sign of celebration or pleasure. But here's the thing. Meat is bad for the environment. We've already proven it. It is bad for very many other reasons. We have already proven this too. We will prove in another case that meat is bad for humans specifically. So, since we have proven this, it then comes down to what matters more, the people's pleasure or the many, many, many negatives that come from the consumption of meat. And it is very clear to proposition that the negatives outweigh any positive that come from individualized pleasure when consuming meat. Now, you said that this would be a big shift, but here's the thing. We mentioned in proposition that this would be in our model, that this would be a gradual shift, that we would gradually phase out the production and consumption of meat in order to allow society to adapt to this. And it must be noted that there are meat alternatives that are incredibly popular, such as Beyond Meat, which is a company that produces hamburgers that taste almost virtually identical to real hamburgers from beef. Because the truth of the matter is that the gradual change, coupled with the fact that these alternative meats exist, mean that this does not have to be a major change in anybody's lives. Now, I will now move on to building our third argument, and that is that the consumption of banning meat would benefit people directly. Now, this is true for two reasons. Number one, a very large number of the diseases that humans face come from animals that we eat. The list is endless. Smallpox, measles, cowpox, these all came from cows. Chickenpox and avian flu, these came from chickens. Swine flu, this came from pigs. COVID-19, it came from bats. Whether the animal is farmed, whether the animal is hunted, in either case, the interaction with the animal creates a situation in which diseases can transfer into humans. By banning the consumption of meat, we make it so much more difficult for the next COVID-19 to jump from an animal host into human beings. The second reason that banning meat would benefit people directly is starvation. Here's the thing. The world right now has a significant percentage of the population that is food insecure or explicitly starving. However, we as humanity produce enough food to feed billions of people, and then we feed it to animals. We feed it to cows, we feed it to chickens. Here's the thing. A massive percentage of the food, of the corn that we grow, of the wheat that we grow, of the soybeans that we grow, a massive percentage of that is then fed to animals. And it must be noted that 1 kilogram of food can only be turned into that 10 kilograms of food, in 1 minute, that 10 kilograms of food can only be turned into 1 kilogram of meat. I will explain after I
First of all, even though there is an overproduction of food, there is also a giant waste of food as well. It's not a waste to feed cows or waste to feed the animals.
It is absolutely a waste to feed cows, and I will explain specifically why through the biology of how food gets turned into mass within an animal. The fact of the matter is that 10 kilograms of corn can only be turned into 1 kilogram of beef, and the reason for that is that the majority of that of the mass of the corn has to be converted, has to be used for energy to convert that little portion left, that 1 kilogram left, into mass within the cow. This is a very well-known biological fact known as a trophic cascade, in which when an animal eats, that only 90%, that only 10% of the mass of the food that something eats can be converted into mass within the animal itself, because the other 90% gets lost as energy making that conversion. Therefore, we are wasting massive amounts of food feeding cows when we could just eat that food, which we've already proven is equally nutritiously dense. And it is these reasons that we believe that proposition is the correct site. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for the fine speech that lasted 7 minutes and 57 seconds. And we can leave the floor whenever he's ready to the second speaker of opposition.
But if everyone's ready, 3, 2, 1. First of all, good evening. Second, Now, I will start with some rebuttals, then I will move on to my arguments. Firstly, the proteins that we get from soybeans, that we get from XYZ plants, are not really do not specifically contain those proteins or those specific proteins that the meat give us. This is the main clash that in the 21st century the vegans and the, I guess, meat eaters have, because and this is also why we are trying to do artificial meat. Basically, we are trying to inject those specific proteins. So soybeans, or I guess beans in general, is not enough to provide people with these specific needs. And also about the methane gas. Yes, 99% of the atmosphere is, I guess, formed of oxygen and nitrogen, but within that 1%, carbon dioxide still has a bigger impact. And also, if it was all just methane, it wasn't, if carbon dioxide was not, I will come to that in a minute. If carbon dioxide was not that impactful, then why didn't we have climate change before the Industrial Revolution? I guess, Yoav, please.
Yoav, okay, so why do you minimize the impact of methane instead of just accepting that both carbon dioxide and methane are both having major impacts on the environment and global warming?
Well, basically, firstly, people have been eating meat for, I guess, centuries, millennia, and it is not necessarily their fault that the cows do produce something, but it is the fault of the capitals that their factories do produce carbon dioxide. It is their fault that they are deliberately, and for their profits, damaging the environment, rather than people simply eating meat. That is the main thing. It's an unwanted change by the public, and if the people have ethical issues, or if the people have feel an ethical responsibility towards this topic, about the harm that the animals feel, about the pain that the animals feel, they could still be vegan. And veganism is getting quite popular nowadays. So this is the main thing. We cannot force a gigantic amount of people. Yes, thank you, please.
Okay. How can you square this difference in which you are saying that veganism is an option that people can follow and be healthy, and that they need the proteins found in meat are necessary to be healthy? How do you square this difference that you have?
Well, they have alternative meat, and alternative meat is developing. We are in a process of developing healthier alternatives for this, and I will come to this in my next argument. But the thing is that we still have options for those whose consciousness is being damaged because of all the harms that the animals go through. And we also accept that the current meat industry is not really a good place, but there is a hope for change, and there will be change in the future. That is for certain. I'll come to that after I explain the damage that this will do to farming communities. They are already vulnerable. The countryside has been vulnerable since the Industrial Revolution. And also we will probably fill these farms with more and more artificial meat factories, or more and more industry within these places. 3, we are currently cities are overpopulated, and if we destroy a major way of wealth within the countryside, which is meat production or meat farming, I will not take any PRS at this moment. If we destroy this, they will probably migrate to cities, and which would do harm on this specific part of the world, this specific public. So okay, this will severely affect the developing nations. Not all nations have the luxury of having artificial meat, or not all nations have these kind of luxuries. Some nations have a specific climate that they are required to eat meat. If Uncle Sam will not distribute us fake burgers from place, then probably we cannot feed the whole world with all of that. And if we have an excess production somewhere, then it's not probably a developing nation which has problems with food. It is a developed nation which has a large meat industry and so on. So these are some of the facts, and these are some of the main rebuttals we have made. So I will explain why there is no such ethical responsibility, and also why it would be bad for the cows, or it would be bad for the pigs in the current state if we ban the meat. First of all, these animals are not current. We evolved them from nature. We have took them apart from nature. They are not part of nature. If you leave a cow unempty on a forest, on an empty field, it probably will die. And most of the people are doing this for the benefit of it. Most of the cows are currently living in farms. They are farm animals currently. And if you ban the production of meat, yes, there will still be byproducts like milk and so on, but these animals will most likely vanish. They will tarnish in numbers. Yes, they do not live in such good conditions currently, but in the near future, which I will prove why they will live a better life, their numbers will severely decrease. Like, statistics shows that only 15% of the cows are there for milk production. The rest is just meat. If you ban meat, then 85% of all cows will disappear. All of their lineage will disappear, and most likely, I won't take a pure. And most likely their lineage will disappear. The races become endangered at this point. And why is this so bad? First of all, we are killing the biodiversity. These animals are a key part in the food chain. They are doing some things within the biodiversity atmosphere. So about the current process and the progress that we are in, and why no average human has any responsibility to do so, or why no one could be forced to change their lifestyle, or could be forced to change their food appetites. First of all, vegan and vegetarian movements are greatly strengthened. If not, we are supporting movements like Freedom for the Cows. We are all supporting movements like movements that diminish the cruelty of the meat industry in many ways. Also, we are beginning to impose some things. More and more fast food companies are switching to better treated animals every day. 3, we are minimizing their pain, and we will most likely continue to minimize their pain, because this is a trend that's going on. More people are being vegetarians, more people are being vegans, and the political consumption culture that we currently have in the 21st century is increasing this. We are beginning to impose sanctions on certain companies, which, and by that we are doing our part in this. We don't need to ban this. There are other alternatives, and this, indeed, as the proposition said, it is a process, but there is no need to ban this, or there is no justification that they have came up with banning this. They are giving us facts, they are giving us biological things, but this is no justification to affect the lifestyle of billions of people. 7 billion people on this earth have been consuming meat, and trying to cut this off is something very problematic, and it really affects these people's personal freedoms in many ways. Thank you all, that was my speech.
Thank you for the fine speech that lasted 7 minutes and 59 seconds. And yeah, we leave the floor to the third speaker of proposition.
Humans are the only conscious creatures on this earth that are having the assumption that they are the only creatures capable enough of feeling, and the only ones that are deserving of a right of life. Today, opposition had to prove one thing. The one thing is that there will be a net positive from eating meat, therefore banning it will be a net negative. By failing to do so, they are on track to losing this debate. I would want to rebuild my mate's arguments, but truth is, they have not properly attacked a single one. So I can't even do my job properly as a third speaker. I will be, so instead what I'm going to be doing is simply going through what has happened in this debate so far, and why opposition's position is something so weak that it shouldn't even be considered a competition. First, my mate came up and spoke about the environmental effect of meat. She has spoken about methane pollution. She has spoken about destruction of ecosystem. To that, I would like to add something else: loss of land. And I'm going to give as an example Brazil. In the Amazon, in Brazil, right now, they are cutting trees to make way for farms. Farms of what? Farms of cows. And what does that result in? That results in a loss of biodiversity, a loss of green space. space. What does that result in ultimately? That is a loss of trees, which we're already lacking in heavily, especially when we're talking about a zone so dense with trees as Amazon, as the Amazon. Secondly, I'm going to talk about fish and how, for example, eating them would absolutely destroy the ecosystem, because you see when those big boats get those big things and just like ram it through the ocean. You do not realize how big it is, but that one thing would be as big as this whole college. Now add that with how small the fish are, and you can realize this scale, just how destructive it might be. We're talking about eradicating whole ecosystems, and the scale of that is absolutely immense. And we do that without any fear and without any negative thoughts, and that is very bad, because fish have also been found, according to rocks, to be able to feel fear and to feel stress. Fish feel stress and feel fear, and it is simply morally incorrect to have them go through that. Secondly, she has spoken about the moral effects of eating meat, and both of these points were not touched upon at all by first opposition speaker. In fact, she has acted as if they were never stated and just ignored them, as if, again, they did not exist. Also, first proposition speaker has preempted how meat can be easily replaced without having to sacrifice on nutritional value, which is something, again, that they have ignored, and they have brought up that point again, showing that they did not pay a single bit of attention to what we were talking about. Then, as I was saying, first up, came up here and spoke about how we are part of the food chain, how we evolved as carnivores. She has then stated that methane doesn't pollute much, and that meat is important to people. And while second prop speaker has already answered those, I want to add some stuff. The fact that we have evolved as carnivores is not true, because second opposition speaker came up and said that we have evolved as omnivores. So is this carnivores or omnivores? The fact is omnivores. But even then, right now we have the choice to choose whether to eat meat or not. While back then, when we were still evolving as a species, we did not have the choice. Food scarcity was the biggest issue we were facing as a species. Therefore, eating meat was a necessity. But now that we have the choice, we can morally ask ourselves, should we eat meat or not? Then, the second proposition speaker came on and rebutted every single thing that first opposition speaker has said. He started by saying how we do not need to eat meat, how plants fulfill all nutritional values, how methane is not harmless. That is a fact. That is not something that can be debated. Methane pollutes around 10 times as much as CO2 if you compare it mass to mass. And then meat might be pleasurable, but negatives outweigh the positives. And aren't we as a species evolved enough to recognize that we have to make sacrifices if we are to develop and reach new heights? Secondly, his main argument was how meat is bad for humans. Firstly, he spoke about the many diseases that can be caused by it. He gave some examples. He gave many examples. Secondly, he spoke about starvation and how simply a simple food choice, instead of eating meat, eating plant-based foods, can fix one of the biggest problems that we have faced ever since the dawn of humanity. And he has mentioned one important fact that I think opposition has chosen to ignore, and that is 1 kilogram of meat needs 10 kilograms of plants to create. That is because when you convert energy sources from A to B, you are losing energy in that process. Then second opposition came on, ignored everything that second opposition has said, as if he wasn't even there, as if it was just first opposition, second opposition. He has spoken about how protein from plants are worse than the ones in meat. Not true. How methane does not pollute. Not true. How and then he has mentioned an interesting question, which if I was illiterate, I would find a great point against banning meat. And that is, why hasn't there been global warming before? And that is because humans did not used to eat meat as much before. Humans did not eat meat as much as we think so. Humans used to be a very herbivorous species, although we did eat meat, but it was very rare because of how tough it is to catch a whole cow, to catch whatever, and to eat it. And by mentioning that question, he has contradicted himself. How so? That is because he before has said that, before first up has spoken about how we evolved to eat meat. And to evolve to eat meat, we have to be repeatedly eating meat. But then suddenly the whole agenda changed, and suddenly, why hasn't there been climate change? Why hasn't there been climate change before? Therefore, their case does not stand. Or if it does stand, it stands on like wooden pillows or very thin, very easy to read. Then he has mentioned how cities are overpopulated. No proof whatsoever. He has spoken about how animals cannot become wild once farms are eradicated. That is not true. They can. He has been found. If you take a farm pig, put it in the wild, the pig will live a full and a fulfilling and long life. Unlike what they are claiming, which is again false, and it has no truth whatsoever. Also, he's spoken about how if we abolish farms, 85% of cows will disappear. Well, yeah, but if we eat them, 100% of them will disappear as well. Then the fact does not make sense whatsoever. What do you mean 85% will disappear? That is because it proves that it is abnormal to have such a big amount of animals in such a small container. Then he has spoken about how factory farmers try and decrease as much pain as they can. That is not true. The whole point of a factory farm as a business is to maximize money, and money does not care about the feeling of the animal. They put animals on top of each other to make as much money as possible. I hope this has been convincing enough. I am proud to propose. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for the nice speech that lasted 8 minutes and 9 seconds. And we can leave the floor to the third speaker of opposition.
I will be starting in a minute. I will be starting in 3, 2, 1. Thank you for the debate. First of all, I will be talking about 3 points because this debate had 3 main clash points. However, I would like to point out 2 important questions that was raised by our opposition's first speaker at the beginning of the debate. The main problem with the propositions standing, let's talk about them. First of all, the first speaker has said that their goal was going to be to highlight that how meat consumption provides more harm than good. One problem with this case is that even if you provide that meat consumption is the worst thing in the world, there is a direct violation of individual rights. So you need to explain the justification. You need to come to us with a legitimate argument on why you are going to violate those people's individual rights. So now let's talk about, wait, my stopwatch has disappeared. Okay, so let's talk about the arguments that were mentioned during this debate. First of all, I think it's about the eating meat is a choice, eating meat is a necessity argument. First of all, they have argued that it was a choice because of those proteins and biological things. However, I do not think that this is the focus of this debate because let's just argue with it, even though it's not the main focus. We have argued that it was not a choice of the people by 2 main points. First of all, they would have eaten us. This is a pretty standing argument because not now. This is a pretty standing argument because with evolution, with the survival instincts, we had to do it, and it is an ongoing process. So we are still doing it. Second of all, the alternative is hard to find. We had 3 points on that. First of all, vegetables are not enough. I am probably not going to be able to get enough proteins out of vegetables, or I will need to eat thousands of them, trillions of them, billions of them, where there is an easy choice. Yeah. Second of them, vegan products are too expensive. Soya sauce, almond milk, all of them are twice the price as normal non-vegan products. The third argument, the switch is incredibly costly. The current system, there are agricultural communities that build their whole ecosystems, they build their whole economies based on plants, based on those meat consumptions. And this is quite problematic within itself. Therefore, eating meat is not a choice. and the POI. Yes.
Your point about vegan options become more expensive is false, because as veganism is going to become widespread, the prices are going to significantly drop, therefore it will not be an economical burden anymore.
Okay, the economical burden problem argument collapses in one main point. The switch is going to be incredibly hard, and this is explained in our farming ecosystems and farming communities argument. In the developing countries, in developed countries, in the US, when you ban meat consumption, yes, probably people and liberals are going to be incredibly happy with it because they will be able to get their vegan milk, and the economic system, yes, it will probably work. However, in the developed countries, in the other half of the world, it is not going to work. Because people do not have that infrastructure, because people do not have the other alternatives, they're not going to be able to produce artificial meat. If it's going to be produced in the US, it's going to be incredibly expensive for them to deport that, to get it there. The transportation, everything's going to be incredibly expensive. Second of all, now I'm going to be done with the first clash point. We argued that it was not a choice, they argued that it was a choice. And I think this clash is just ours because we explained it in two different branches and they don't have a standing argument. Even though they proved that eating meat was a choice, then comes another question. If this is an exact choice, if this is a direct choice, if this is an actual individual right, why are you banning it? In order to ban something, in order to take that, like alcohol is incredibly harmful, right? It's probably not good for us to eat it, but it's still allowed. Why? Because it's an individual right. So if you're going to talk about those harms and the facts, that you need to go with your ethical obligation, which was not answered during this debate, which was incredibly problematic. Even if it is a right, even if it is a choice, then I need to get the justification arguments, which they do not have. And on the contrary, we do have other alternatives. This is an individual, this is a direct source of individual pleasure. It has a direct cultural aspect, and the third of all, the switch is incredibly expensive. Therefore, we have individual pleasure areas, individual right areas that cannot be interfered with, an actual legitimate reason which the proposition side fails to propose. And even if you proved it, even if you prove that individual rights could be expanded due to certain extents, I propose a different thing. Let's ban the celebrities' private jets. This is going to provide more benefits to the climate change, to the animal rights, to everything. Therefore, if they're going to come with their ethical obligation, then other questions will arise. Now, another problem with their stance, they act as if we are abolishing human rights, abolishing animal rights, vegan rights. They act as we are just they act as if I have a knife in my hand and I am just stabbing every single animal that I see. No, this is not the case. We are talking about how the process is getting better. We're talking about how animal rights are actually going good. If I can throw a pizza sauce in Mona Lisa's face just because of my animal activism, just because of the inner activist within myself, it means that the process is going quite well. Our moral circle is expanding day by day. At first, the researches that you have found, you can find them because people do them, because people wonder whether, oh my God, do bees actually feel things? Should I be doing experiments with them? Our moral circle has expanded that we conduct research on animals to understand whether they feel pain or not. This is incredibly important because now animal rights, vegan activists, all of them are just expanding. They are going in a great way. Therefore, the process is getting better and it will get better. So we do not need to ban. We do not need to ban meat. Yes, go ahead.
All right. The process is getting better. We are learning more and more about animals that feel pain. What is the end result of this process? If we find that animals feel pain, how do we not then take steps to stop them from feeling pain at the behest of human activity?
We are activisms. There is a company in Turkey called Kafes Turkey, which basically provides the chickens from living in like a 1 meter square place to different places. You talk about how the only aim of companies is money. Yes, it is money. Therefore, we have another transactional alternative. We have political consumption. Now, as a user, as a feminist, I want this water bottle company to do things about the issue. I want them to do things about animal rights. And if they don't, I don't buy their products. And this provides a direct transaction. They care about money. And if I care about the rights as the consumer, then they need to care about the rights as well. And this is where we are at today. Second clash of today's match, the health thing, the ethical obligation. Still, I think this was incredibly proposition's fault that they did not propose any ethical arguments. We need to understand, we need to compromise this. I need to understand why I'm just going to get rid of an individual right of the general public. That's the part that I don't understand. Third of all, the method climate change argument. If we're going to take an action, actions need big impact. And big impacted actions need a responsibility argument. If this climate change is going to be abolishing with this action, which I do not understand, they need to put that impact in short, like, how is the methane gas more important than the private jets of celebrities flying all over the world? How is this more important than big companies producing clothes, just killing people and just releasing tons of carbon dioxide? I do not understand how this is the action with the greatest impact and why this has to be addressed in specific. And if you still, again, talk to me about that, then again, you need to prove that this when put in comparison is greater than the ethical obligation, which you do not talk about. And responsibility, what our first speaker and second speaker talked about, this was incredibly important. The responsibility aspect, they need to put a specific responsibility to those people, to those children of age of 5 eating meat and having a barbecue party. How are they responsible? I need to understand their responsibility and their actual role in the climate change, in the animal rights. We still are protecting animal rights. The process is getting better. Or even if it wasn't getting better, you can pull lawsuits, do other sanctions. And again, we're therefore very proud to oppose. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for the white speech that lasted 8 minutes and 3 seconds.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. First of all, we believe that the main problem in the arguments of the proposition team is that the problems unlinked with the meeting, solely with eating meat, was linked with it, and the responsibility of the bigger impacts were just put it onto the normal people, which we claim that they already did something to change the world, and they already give some efforts, make some efforts to change the system. So what is the real moral place that we can give the responsibility to the normal people? So first of all, what we clashed on, the first place that we clashed on was the main, they imply that the non-essentiality of the meat and for the people, but we didn't imply that it's an obligation for people to be healthy. We accept that healthy vegans does exist, but the point is that majority of the people are just accustomed to eating this kind of food and have this type of eating habits, and it's hard for them to change them really fast. And we believe that it's not their obligation to change and to just take this hardness and just get this difficulty because of the problems they didn't cause directly. Actually, the proposition team had to prove us that our consciousness as human beings gives us the responsibility to abandon our biological needs over to protect animals. But there is not such a proof in the match. So this clash just comes to us. And the other point was that they claim that we will make it by gradually. So Burhan has said the gradualism already exists in this world, and in an organic way we are taking progress right now, and then in an organic way we will also take the progress for the endurance of the environment and for the welfare of the environment and the animal rights. So taking this into consideration, we will also have the impacts, have the good effects of this reducing the food consumption. But what we will do also is that we will prevent the bad effects, which Burhan also mentioned about the countries that bases their economics on farming, which is not just answered in any way by proposition. Actually, they claim to overcome the injustices by just growing food plants on the place where just plants are used to feed animals, but they just not give us any mechanism to overcome the injustice. Yes, there is an injustice of food, but how will ease the access of the way that unprivileged masses, unprivileged people find food? So, but in the other case, just Burhan said, a big mass of people will be affected badly, and the countries will have more and more load, and this gradualism will not happen in an organic way, so we will not just be able to consume the negative impacts of those challenges faced by banning a workforce directly. So, and the last part, there is an overconsumption, we believe, but the problem is not, as I mentioned in my speech at first, it's not the problem of eating meat, it's the problem of overconsumption. And again, as we mentioned, the gradually progress will also help us to overcome these problems in the future in an organic way as well. And hence, as the challenges faced by this, it's not only the principles, but it's also the practical sides of the match that gives us the match this point, we believe, and we take both parts in the moral and also the practical side of the match. Thank you.
Thank you for the reply speech that lasted 4 minutes and 6 seconds, and we can move towards the end of this debate with our last reply speech from proposition team.
There have been a lot of clashes in this debate, but the majority of them boil down to one of two instances, either in which opposition has either misunderstood the concept of personal freedom, or in which they've misunderstood biological concepts. Let's start with personal freedom. It is a very common statement, the idea you can't shout fire in a crowded theater. But what does this mean? It means that you cannot take actions that would directly cause harm to others. By doing so, you lose your personal freedom to do such a thing because because the greater good requires that you do not harm those who surround you. In much the same vein, the idea that eating meat is a personal freedom only applies if we ignore the fact that the eating of meat is bad for the society as a whole. We have already proven this quite conclusively with the fact that the consumption of meat harms the environment through methane production. It harms people through through the spread of new diseases. And it harms people in taking food that would go to people and feeding it to cows, thus reducing the amount of food total available on the earth. In this regard, the personal freedoms do not apply because the greater good requires that action be taken to help humanity as a whole. The fact of the matter is that this misunderstanding of personal freedom is an incredibly problematic one, but more problematic are the many misunderstandings of biological concepts. The idea that proteins are better in cows is incorrect. The majority of proteins that all living organisms use are incredibly similar to one another. Therefore, the proteins that are found in beans, are found in humans, are found in other animals. And therefore, the consumption of high protein plants is equal to the consumption of high protein animals. And even if that was not the case, we could still show it is quite trivial to prove that the biological process by which one protein is converted into another exists within the human body. It is, if a person were to eat a plant that had proteins that the human did not eat, those proteins are recyclable because the human body is endlessly recyclable. Now, why do these two clashes matter? Well, the first clash on the misunderstanding of personal freedom, it matters because boiling down one of opposition's key points just tells us that some people take pleasure from eating meat, and therefore they should be allowed to, therefore their pleasure that they attain should be allowed to cause a massive amount of pollution, should be allowed to cause climate change, should be allowed to result in the spread of diseases, should be allowed to lead to greater starvation. They also misunderstand where meat is consumed. They keep talking about developing countries, but meat is a luxury item. It is something that is more expensive than plants, and as a result, the consumption of meat is overwhelmingly, disproportionately consumed by wealthy people in wealthy nations. Now, why does the clash on biology matter? Because fundamentally, this debate is one rooted in biology. The biology of meat and the biology of how the banning of meat would interact with humans. Of course, it is also a political debate. Of course, it is also a social debate. But the problems with the misunderstandings of biology here inform the problems with the politics and with the social aspects. Because by insisting on, for example, that the consumption of meat is better for protein intake, they obscure the fact that this is not the case and that the biological argument is not in their favor, it is in ours. And this is why proposition has won this debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your reply. It was 3 minutes and 59 seconds. And thank you all for the fine debate. And we will see you in about 10 minutes. Thank you.